अ, हेलो दोस्तों। अ, आप सभी को और एक नई वीडियो में स्वागत करना चाहूँगा। एंड आज थोड़ी सी ये वीडियो बहुत लेट में शूट कर रहा हूँ और बुक रीडिंग कर रहा हूँ। ज़्यादा लेट हो रही, लगभग रात के 11 बज रहे होंगे आई थिंक। ओके, 11 के नहीं, 11:30, लगभग 12 बजने वाले हैं। तो मैं बिना बिना वीडियो रिकॉर्ड किए एंड इसे अपलोड किया तो मैं सोने वाला बंदा नहीं हूँ। तो मुझे रीडिंग करना है, चाहे वो 10 मिनट या 15 मिनट्स जो भी हो, लेकिन मुझे रीडिंग करना है। ओके, तो आज आप सभी को फिर से स्वागत करता हूँ। आज मैं बात करने वाला हूँ जो कि लास्ट यस्टरडे मैंने कौन सी टॉपिक के ऊपर बात की थी। चैप्टर नंबर 5 के बारे में बात किया था। एंड आज उसी चैप्टर की जो हाफ रीडिंग किया था उसके बारे में आज आगे रीडिंग करेंगे। तो जो चैप्टर नंबर 5 की जो टाइटल है, डू आई नीड यू, क्या तुम्हें क्या मुझे तुम्हारी ज़रूरत है। ओके, इसमें कैसे फेशियल एक्सप्रेशन को हम रीडिंग करते हैं एंड कैसे हमारे मसल्स वर्क करते हैं अकॉर्डिंग टू द आवर एक्सप्रेशंस। ओके, तो नाउ आई एम कमिंग टू द टुडेज टॉपिक्स जो कि हम बात करेंगे। पहला जो टॉपिक है, द जॉयस एंड सरोस ऑफ एम्पैथी। We go to the movies to escape into worlds, love and heartbreak and adventure and fear. But the heroes and the villains are just actors projected in two dimensions on a screen. So, why should we care at all about what happens to these fleeting phantasms? Why do movies make us weep, laugh and gasp? एक क्वेश्चन आता है। And to understand why you care about the actors, let's begin with what happens in your brain when you are in pain. Imagine that someone stabs your hand with a syringe needle. There is no single place in the brain where that pain is perceived. Instead, the event activates several areas of the brain, all operating in concert. This network is summarized as the pain matrix. Here is the part. Surprising part. The pain matrix is crucial to how we connect with others. If you watch somebody else get stabbed, most of your pain matrix becomes activated, not those areas that tell you you have actually been touched, but instead those parts involved in the emotional experience of pain. In other words, watching someone else in pain and being in pain use the same neural machinery. This is the basis of empathy. To empathize with another person is literally feel their pain. You run a compelling simulation of what it would be like if you are we if you were in the situation. Our capacity for this is why stories like movies and novels are so absorbing and so pervasive across human culture, whether it's about total strangers or made of characters. Your experience their agony and their ecstasy. You fluidly become them. They live their lives and stand in their vantage points. When you, when uh, when you see another person suffer, you can try to tell yourself that it's their issue, not yours. But neurons deep in your brain cannot tell the difference. This built in facility to feel another person's pain is part of what makes us so good at stepping out of our shoes and into their shoes, neurally speaking. But why do we have this facility in the first, first place? From an evolutionary point of view, empathy is a useful skill. By gaining a better grasp of what someone is feeling, he gives a better prediction about what they will do next. However, the accuracy of empathy is limited, and in many cases, we simply project ourselves onto others. Take an example. Susan Smith, a mother in South Carolina, who in 1994 kindled the empathy of a nation when he reported to the police that she had been carjacked by a man who drove away with her sons, still in the car for 9 days. She fled on national television for the rescue and return of her voice. Strangers around the nation offered help and support. Eventually, Susan Smith confessed the murder of her own children. Everyone had fallen for her story of the carjacking because her real act was so outside the realm of normal prediction. Although the details of her case are all reasonably obvious in retrospect, they were difficult to see at the time because we typically interpret other people from the vantage point of who we are and what we are capable of. Okay? And we cannot help but simulate uh, others and connect with others, care about others because we are hardwired to be social creatures. That raises a question: are our brain dependent on social interaction? What would happen if the brain were starved of human contact? In 2009, peace activist Sarah Soud and her two companions were hiking in the mountains of northern Iraq, an area that was at that time peaceful. They followed recommendations from locals to see Ahmed Ava waterfall. Unfortunately, this waterfall was located at the Iraqi border with Iran. They were arrested by Iranian border guards on suspicion of being American spies. The two men were put in the same cell, but Sarah was separated from them in solitary confinement, with the exception of two 30-minute periods each day. She spent the next 410 days in an isolated cell. In after the being isolated in Sarah's world. In the early weeks and the months of the solitary confinement, you are reduced to an animal like state. I mean, you are an animal in a cage, and majority of your hours are spent pacing, and the animal-like state eventually transforms into a more plant-like state. Your mind starts to slow down, and your thoughts become repetitive. Your brain turns on itself and becomes the source of your worst pain and your worst torture. I had relive every moment of my life. Eventually, you run out of memories. You have told them all to yourself so many times. And it does not take that long. Sarah's social deprivation caused deep psychological pain. Without interaction, a brain suffers. Solitary confinement is illegal in many jurisdictions precisely because observers, observers have long recognized the damage caused by stripping away one of the most vital aspects of a human life, that is interaction with others. Starved of contact with the world, Sarah, Sarah rapidly entered a hallucinatory state. वो क्या होता है? Okay, the sun would come in and at a certain time of day at the angle through my window, and all of the little dust particles in my cell were illuminated by the sun. I saw all those particles of dust as other human beings occupying the planet, and they were in the stream of life. They were interacting, they were bouncing off one another, they were doing something collective. I saw myself as off in a corner, whirled off out of the stream of life. In the September 2010, after more than a year in captivity, Sarah Sarah was released and allowed to rejoin the world. The trauma events stayed with her. She suffered from depression and was easily led the panic. The next year, she married Saint Bauer, one of the other hikers. She reports that she and Sen are able to calm one another, but it's not always easy. They both carry emotional scars. The philosopher Martin Heidegger suggested that it is difficult to speak of a person being instead. We are typically being in the world. This was his way of emphasizing that the world around you is a large part of who you are. The self does not exist in a vacuum, although scientists and the clinicians can observe what happens to people in solitary confinement. It is difficult to study directly. However, an experiment by neuroscientist Noami Heisenberger can give insight into what happens in the brain in a slightly tamer condition when we are excluded from a group. Imagine throwing a ball around with a couple of other people, and at some point you get cut out of the game. The other two throw back and forth between themselves, excluding you. Heisenberger's experiment is based on that simple scenario. She had voluntarily play a simple computer game in which their animated character threw a ball around with two other players. The volunteers were led to believe that the other players were controlled by two other humans. But in fact, they were just part of a computer program. At first, the others played nicely, but after a while, they caught the volunteer out of the game and simply threw between each other. Heisenberger had the volunteer play this game while they were lying down in a brain scanner. The technique is called functional magnetic resonance imaging और fMRI। ओके, इसके बारे में हम ऑलरेडी रीड कर चुके हैं चैप्टर नंबर 4 में, वो जो कि हमारी जो लास्ट चैप्टर थी। Heisenberger had the volunteer play and she found something remarkable. When the volunteers were left out of the game, area involved in their pain matrix become active. Not getting the ball might seem insignificant, but to the brain, social rejections is so meaningful that it hurts literally. Why? Why does rejection hurt? Presumably, this is a clue that social bonding has evolutionary importance. In other words, the pain is a mechanism that steers us toward interaction and acceptance by others. Our inbuilt neural machinery drives us toward bonding with others. It urges us to form groups. This sheds light on the social world that surrounds us. Everywhere humans are constantly from groups. We bind together through links of family, friendship, work style, sports teams, religion, culture, skin pigment, language, hobbies, and political affiliation. It gives us comfort to belong to a group, and that fact gives us a critical hint about our species history. Now, I talk about the topic that is the joys and the sorrows of empathy. ओके, आप सभी को मैं बताना चाहूँगा इस टॉपिक में एक्चुअल में क्या है। एक्चुअली में इस टॉपिक में ये लिखा है कि जो हम ह्यूमंस होते हैं ना, उन्हें उस तरह के इंसान पसंद होते हैं जो उन्हीं की तरह होते हैं। सपोज मैं किस तरह के लोगों को पसंद करूँ, जो मेरे तरह बिहेव करते हो, मेरे तरह जो लाइक करता है। एंड आल्सो इसमें बहुत सारे चीज़ें हिंट्स दिया जाता है कि अगर हम किसी एक ग्रुप से बिलोंग करते हैं, जैसे कि एक रिलीजन हो गया, एक कलर के हो गए, स्किन कलर, हमारे हॉबीज़ भी हो सकते हैं, एंड अ, हमारे लैंग्वेज भी, हॉबीज़, एक प्लेस हो सकता है। यहाँ से हम अच्छे से हम कंफर्ट से बात कर सकते हैं। ओके, या हम किसी एक क्लास में पढ़ते हो, एंड इसमें एक एक्सपेरिमेंट था, एंड आल्सो एक केस भी है जहाँ पर ये कहते हैं कि आज वो एक्स दो कपल्स इराक में घूम रहे थे। मतलब कुछ कुछ देखना, कौन सी वाटरफॉल थी वो, वाटरफॉल लाइक इराक की बॉर्डर के पास एक वाटरफॉल है, उसमें उससे देखने के लिए वो चलते चलते चले थे। एंड उसे जो इराक की जो बॉर्डर्स जो होते हैं, जो बॉर्डर प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए रहते हैं ना, वो उन्हें पकड़ लेते हैं। पकड़ लेने के बाद उन्हें बहुत एक सॉलिटरी कन्फाइनमेंट में डाला जाता है। एंड उसमें से एक लड़की थी जो सारा नाम की होती है, एंड वो अ, अपना जो अपना जो उसका जो एक्सपीरियंस होता है वो शेयर करती है कि अ, जब मैं उस कन्फाइनमेंट के अंदर था, सॉलिटरी मतलब अकेला, उस टाइम में उसके अंदर ना मैं किसी से बात कर सकता हूँ, ना बाहर की आवाज़ मेरे अंदर आती है। एंड दिन की एक टाइम आती है जिस टाइम पर एक सूरज की किरणें अंदर आती है, वो भी एक ही पॉइंट में। एंड उस पॉइंट के साथ जो डस्ट पार्टिकल्स होते हैं वो सो होते हैं। अब आप देखे होंगे टिंडल इफेक्ट के बारे में, धुआं आता है तो लाइटिंग आता है, तो वो सारे धुआं के जो पार्टिकल्स होते हैं वो आपको दिखाई देने लगते हैं। उसी तरह वो अंदर आते हैं, एंड उस डस्ट पार्टिकल को देखकर बस, उसमें भी एक केस है कि हाँ डस्ट पार्टिकल देगा। डस्ट पार्टिकल्स क्या होते हैं, अपने आप में खुद उछल कूद करते हैं, बाउंसिंग होते हैं ऑफ एंड डाउन, एंड एक दूसरे को इंटरेक्ट करते हैं। ऐसे ही ये डस्ट पार्टिकल की जैसा ही हमारे जो ह्यूमंस होते हैं वो सोशल इंटरेक्शन के लिए बने हैं। अगर तुम सोशल इंटरेक्शन नहीं कर होते हो, जैसे कि ये सारा ना बहुत दिन तक सोशली कन्फाइनमेंट रहा, सॉलिटरी कन्फाइनमेंट में रहा। एंड जब वो बाहर के निकला तो वो सेन नामक एक व्यक्ति से विवाह किया, जो कि उसी सेम एक्सपीरियंस किया था जो सॉलिटरी में रहा था, ताकि एंड कभी कभी ना उन दोनों की जो इमोशनल एंड इन दोनों की जो चीज़ें डिफ़िकल्टीज समझ में आ नहीं रही आती, बिकॉज ऐसे ऐसे डिप्रेशन भी चला जाता था वो सारा। बट कभी कभी वो आज मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम दे अंडरस्टूड ईच अदर, ओके, बिकॉज दे आर कम टू द सेम टाइप एक एक्सपीरियंस करके आए हैं। ओके, तो दे आर फील कंफर्टेबल विथ हिम। And next topic I want to talk about that is beyond survival of the fittest. Beyond survival of the fittest. When we think about human evolution, we are all familiar the concept survival of the fittest. It calls the mind the picture of a strong and wily individual who can outfight, outturn, or outmate the other members of its species. In other words, one has to be a good competitor to thrive and survive. That model has good explanatory power, but it leaves some aspects of our behavior difficult to explain. Consider altruism. Why does survival of the fittest explain why people help each other out? Selection of the strongest individual does not seem to cover it. The theorist introduced the additional idea of kin selection. This means that I care not only about myself but also others with whom I share genetic material, for example, brothers and cousins. As the evolutionary biologist J.S. Halden cubed, Halden cubed, I would gladly jump in the river, save two of my brothers and eight of my cousins. However, even kin selection is not enough to explain all the uh, facets of human behaviors because people get together and cooperate irrespective of kinship. That observation leads to the idea of group selection. Here is the concept. If a group is composed entirely of people who cooperate, everyone in the group will be better off for it. On average, you will fare better than other people who are not very cooperative with their neighbors. Together, the members of a group can help each other to survive. They are suffer more productive and better able to overcome challenges. This drive to bond with others is called EU sociality. EU is a Greek for good and it provides a glue irrespective of kinship that allows the building of tribes, groups, and nations. It's not that individual selection does not occur, it's just that it does not provide the complete picture. Although humans are competitive and individualistic, much of that time it's also the case that we spend quite a bit of our lives cooperating for the good of group. This has allowed human populations to thrive across planet and to build societies and civilization. Feats, feats that individuals, no matter how fit, and could never pull off in isolation. A real progress is only possible with alliances that become confederation. And our EU sociality is one of the major factors in the richness and the complexity of our modern world. So our drive to come together into groups yields a survival advantage, but it has a dark side as well. For every in group, there must exist at least one out group. Okay, beyond survival of the fittest, इसमें ह्यूमन इवोल्यूशन के बारे में भी एक कंसेप्ट आता है. सर्वाइव कौन करता था? जो पुराने टाइम पे जो इंसान बाहर लड़ सकता था किसी खतरे के साथ, एंड आल्सो वो लड़ सकता था अपने अंदर के वो इंसान के साथ, एंड आल्सो ही प्रोटेक्टिव। एंड इसी से एक अच्छी बात आता है कि हम हम ना अपने आप का तो केयर करते हैं, एंड आल्सो वी टेक केयर अबाउट अदर्स, जो कि हमारे जेनेटिक हो सकते हैं, जैसे कि हमारे भाई बहन, अपने बहन, या किसी से हमारा जो गहरा रिश्ता बॉन्ड रहा हो, उनके लिए हम मर मिटते हैं। जिसमें यहाँ पर एक एग्जांपल दिया गया है कि एक J.S. हाल्डेन नामक एक व्यक्ति जो बायोलॉजिस्ट, इवोल्यूशनरी बायोलॉजिस्ट, जो अपने ज़िंदगी की एक हिस्सा को बताते हुए कहते हैं कि मैं ग्लैडली में जंप किया, खुशी खुशी में जंप किया मेरे 2 भाइयों को बचाने, एंड एक मेरे जो 8 कजन्स थे उन्हें बचाने के लिए मैं नदी में कूद पड़ा। ऐसा क्यों हुआ? बिकॉज वो मेरे जेनेटिक्स में मेरे फैमिली थे, तो ऑटोमेटिकली वो निकल के आती है कि हाँ उसे मुझे हेल्प करना है, ना कि मुझे फोर्सफुली किया कहा जाता है कि अरे भाई कोई जाकर उन्हें बचाओ नदी से, नहीं। ओके। एंड इसमें और एक बात को कहा गया है, एंड सोसाइटी, हमारी जो फैमिली हो गया, एंड जो सर्कल रह गया, वो उसी इंसान से प्यार करेंगे, उसी इंसान को इम्पोर्टेंस ज़्यादा देंगे जो उन्हें अच्छे से ट्रीट करता हो। जैसे कि जो इंसान सभी लोग को बात करता है कैसे हो, सभी को पूछता है, जो नेबर्स होते हैं उनसे भी अच्छी बनती है बॉन्ड, एंड जो अपने घर में भी वो सभी से वो अच्छे से बात करते हैं, सभी से पूछता है कि क्या करते हैं, कैसे है, ठीक है ना सब, एंड सबका केयर करता है, उससे लोग पसंद करेंगे। या एक इंसान रहता है जो किसी से बात नहीं करता है, किसी चुपचाप रहता है, किसी से चूज करेंगे लोग लीडर के हिसाब से, जो सबके साथ मिलके है, सबके साथ अच्छा बॉन्ड है, लोग उसी को चूज करेंगे, हाँ कि नहीं? मेरे ओपिनियन से तो उसी को ही चूज करेंगे, बिकॉज वो सभी के साथ मिक्स है, तो उसे पता है कि हाँ थोड़ी सी ही पता हो, लेकिन उसे पता है कि ये इसमें ये क्वालिटीज़ है, अगर ये ऐसा है, ये इसमें कुछ कारण, कुछ लो क्वालिटीज़ भी है, लो वीकनेस भी कुछ भी है, उसे पता चल जाता है मिलने के बाद उससे। ओके, इसके बारे में। एंड नेक्स्ट coming to the another topic, that is outgroup outgroups, an understanding of in-groups and out-groups. It is critical to understand our history. Repeatedly, all across the globe, group of people inflict violence on other groups, even those that are defenseless and pose no direct threat. The year 1915 saw the assist, a systematic killing of over a million Armenians by the Ottoman Turks in the Nanking massacre, massacre 1937. The Japanese invaded China and killed hundreds of thousands of unarmed civilians. In 1994, in a period of 100 days, the Hutus in Rwanda killed 800,000 Tutsis, largely with machetes. And I don't view this with the detached eye of a historian. If you, if you were to look at my family tree, you would see that most of the branches come to an abrupt end in the early 1940s. They were murdered because they were Jews, caught in the jaws of Nazi genocide as the scapegoated outgroup. After the Holocaust, Europe got in the habit of bowing never again. But 50 years later, genocide happened again, this time just 600 miles away in Yugoslavia between 1992 and 1995. During the Yugoslav War, over 100,000 Muslims were slaughtered by Serbians in violent acts that become known as ethnic cleansing. One of the worst events of the war happened in Srebrenica. Srebrenica. Here, here, over the course of 10 days, 10,000 Bosnian Muslims, known as Bosniaks, were shot and killed. They had taken refuge inside a United Nations compound after Srebrenica was surrounded by siege forces. But on July 11th, 1995, the United Nations commanders expelled all the refugees from the compound, delivering them into the hands of their enemies waiting just outside the gates. Women were raped, men were executed, even children were killed. I flew to Sarajevo, Sarajevo to better understand what happened, and there I had the chance to speak with a tall, middle-aged man named Hassan Nuhanovic. Hassan, a Bosnian Muslim, had been working at the compound as a UN translator. His family was also there among the refugees, but they had been our sent out the compound to die, while only he had been allowed to stay because of his value as a translator. His mother, father, and brother were killed that day. The fact that haunts, haunts him the most is this: the continuation of the killings of torture was perpetrated by our neighbors. They are the very people we had been living with for decades. They were capable of killing their own school friends. The exemplify exemplify the ways in which normal social interaction broke down. He told me how Serbs arrested a Bosniak dentist. They hung him by his arms from a light pole, and they beat him with a metal bar until they broke his spine. Hassan told me how the dentist hung there for 3 days while Serbian children walked past his body on their way to school. as he put it, there are universal values, and those values are very basic. Don't kill. In April 1992, this "don't kill" suddenly disappeared, and it becomes "go and kill." What allows such an alarming shift in human interaction? How can it be compatible with a eusocial species? Why does genocide continue to happen all around our planet? Traditionally, we examine warfare and killing in the context of history and economics and politics, and however, for a complete picture, I believe we need also to understand this as a neural phenomenon. It, co- it would normally feel unconsensible to murder your neighbor. So, what suddenly allows hundreds or thousands of people to do exactly that? What is it about certain situations that short circuits the normal social functioning of the brain? ओके, आपको मैं बताना चाहूँगा इस जो टॉपिक मैंने रीडिंग किया, आउट ग्रुप्स, इसमें ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं दिया है. इसमें बहुत सारे केसेस दिया हैं जो कि वार के बारे में है. एंड एक वार ऐसा है कि जहाँ पर इतना ज़्यादा किल्ड किया जा रहा था. आपको पता है, आपके कोई किसी को मार रहा होगा तो हमें अंदर फील होता है, भाई क्यों मार रहा है, भाई मारना मत उसे, भाई मारना, डोंट किल. एंड उसी टाइम पे क्या हुआ था कि ऐसे वो डोंट किल की जगह पे ऐसे वर्ड आया था, गो एंड किल, जाओ एंड मारो. मतलब हमें ये शॉर्ट सर्किट हमारे दिमाग में अंदर कुछ, जैसे कि एग्जाम्पल आपको भी देखा, बोल बोल के आप मैं समझाना चाहता हूँ कि कभी कभी जो हम सर्किट्स बनाते हैं ना, हमारे जैसे कि हम घर में इलेक्ट्रिक वेयर अच्छे से कनेक्ट किया है, एंड कहीं थोड़ी सी गड़बड़ी हो गई तो सारी सर्किट्स ही खराब हो जाएगी, फ्यूज हो जाएगी, तो सारी सर्किट्स ख़त्म, उड़ जाएगी एक ही बंदे से. अगर एक ही फ्यूज से सारी जो सर्किट हो गई वो खराब हो जाती है. अगर हमारे दिमाग के अंदर भी ऐसे ही सर्किट्स होते हैं दिमाग में, अगर एक सर्किट कुछ गलत भी हो गया, कुछ इधर उधर भी हो गया, तो वो दिमाग उल्टा कर देती है. ओके, वो सेम चीज़ यहाँ पर ब्रेन फंक्शन के ऊपर बात किया गया है. And now coming to the next topic, that is some more equal than others. Can can a breakdown of normal social functioning be studied in laboratory? I designed an experiment to find out. ओके, इसमें एक सोशल फंक्शनिंग स्टडी किया गया है लैबोरेटरी में. तो इसमें हम देखने वाले हैं क्या वो लैबोरेटरी में स्टडी किया गया है. आवर फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन वाज ए सिंपल वन. एक मेरा छोटा सा सिंपल वाला क्वेश्चन है. डोज योर बेसिक सेंस ऑफ एम्पैथी टुवर्ड someone change depending on whether they are in your in group or out group? क्या तुम्हारा जो एम्पैथी किसी चीज़ को देकर, किसी लोग को देकर, इन ग्रुप और आउट ग्रुप, तुम्हारे जेनेटिक वाला या कोई अलग बंदा, ऐसे देखकर फैसला होता है, एम्पैथी आता है, या ऑटोमेटिकली आता है एम्पैथी? ओके, इसके ऊपर ये सारी जो लैबोरेटरी में जो एक्सपेरिमेंट हुआ है इसके ऊपर. We put participants in the scanner. They saw 6 hands on the screen. like a spinning wheel in a game. So the computer randomly picks one of the hands. That hand then expands into the middle of the screen, and you watch it get tossed with a cotton swab or stabbed a syringe needle. These are two actions that yield about the same activity in the visual system, but very different reactions in the rest of the brain. As we saw earlier, watching someone else in pain activates one's own pain matrix. That's the basis of empathy. So now we were able to push our questions about empathy to the next level. Once we had established this baseline condition, we made a very simple change. The same six hands appeared on the screen, but now each hand a one word level, reading Christian, Jewish, atheist, Muslim, Hindu, and Scientologist. When a hand was randomly selected, it expanded the middle of the screen and was then tossed with a cotton swab or stabbed with a syringe needle. Our experimental questions was this: would your brain care as much when seeing a member of an outgroup getting hurt? We found a good deal of individual variability, but on average, people's brain showed a larger empathetic response when they saw someone in group in pain, and less of a response when it was a member of one of their outgroups. The result is especially remarkable given that these were simply one word levels. It takes very little to establish group membership. A basic categorization is enough to change your brain's preconscious response to another person in the pain. Now, one might have opinions about the divisiveness of religion, but there is a deeper point to note here. In our study, even atheists showed a larger response to pain in the head, hand level atheist, and less of an empathetic response to other levels. So, result is not fundamentally about religion. It's about which team you are on. We see that people can feel lower empathy for members of an outgroup. But to understand something like violence or genocide, we still need to drill down one step further to dehumanization. Lasana Harris of the University of Leiden in the Holland has conducted a series of experiments that move us closer to understanding how that happens. Harris is looking for changes in the brain's social network. In particular, The medial prefrontal cortex, a small m, capital P, capital F, capital C, MPFC. This region becomes active when we are interacting with or thinking about other people, but it's not active when we are dealing with inanimate objects like a coffee mug. Harris, Harris shows volunteer photographs of people from different social groups. For example, homeless people or drug addicts, and he finds that the MPFC is less active when they look at a homeless person. It's as though the person is more like an object, as he puts it, by shutting down the system that see the homeless person as a fellow human. One does not have to experience the unpleasant pressures of feelings, but about not giving money. In other words, the homeless have become dehumanized. The brain is viewing them more like objects and less like people. Not surprisingly, only one is less likely to treat them with consideration. Harris explains, if you don't properly diagnose people as human beings, then the moral rules that are reserved for human people may not apply. Dehumanization is a key component of genocide, just as the Nazis viewed the Jews as something less than human. The Serbs in former Yugoslavia viewed the Muslims this way. When I was